There was a time where Europe and America were not the dominant powers. A time when an African emperor's gold-laden pilgrimage to Mecca caused the price of gold to crash across continents. Paris and London were small backwaters, while Chinese cities had populations in the millions and technologies centuries ahead of anything in Europe. The most advanced mathematics, medicine and philosophy were being written in Arabic, not Latin. For centuries, Europe was a backwater, plagued by war, disease and feudal squabbles, while the real centers of power, wealth and innovation thrived elsewhere. And yet, within a few centuries, most of the globe was under European rule. So how did this unlikely continent rise from the shadows to dominate the globe? Let's unravel the true story of how Europe came to rule the world. For much of the medieval era, Europe was not the center of the world. In fact, it was far from it. While feudal lords ruled over scattered villages and peasants toiled in the fields, the world's true powerhouses were flourishing elsewhere. In Asia, China's Song dynasty, 960–1279, was a marvel of innovation. The Chinese invented printing, gunpowder, the compass, and paper money. Their cities, like Kaifeng and Hangzhou, boasted populations in the millions, unmatched anywhere in Europe. Later, the Ming dynasty would send Admiral Zheng's treasure fleets as far as Africa, projecting Chinese power across the Indian Ocean. The Islamic world, stretching from Cordoba in Spain to Baghdad and Cairo, was a beacon of learning. Scholars there preserved and expanded upon ancient Greek knowledge, pioneering advances in mathematics, medicine, astronomy, and philosophy. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad was the intellectual heart of the world, attracting thinkers from across continents. Meanwhile, in Africa, the Mali Empire dazzled with its wealth. The city of Timbuktu became a center of learning and trade, and Mansa Musa's legendary pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324 was so extravagant that it reportedly destabilized gold markets across North Africa and the Middle East. Across the Atlantic, the Maya, Aztec, and Inca civilizations built monumental cities, devised complex calendars, and ruled over millions. Their sophisticated agriculture, engineering, and governance was beyond anything in Europe at the time. Europe was fragmented and often in turmoil. The continent was racked by internal wars, recurring plagues like the Black Death, and a rigid feudal system that stifled innovation and mobility. Urbanization lagged far behind Asia and the Islamic world. In 1300, Europe's largest city, Paris, had perhaps 200,000 people, while Hangzhou in China had over 1 million. So what changed? How did Europe begin to claw its way out of the medieval shadows? The High Middle Ages, 1300, saw a quiet revolution in the fields. The introduction of the heavy plough, the horse collar, and three-field crop rotation dramatically increased agricultural productivity. This led to a population boom. Europe's population nearly doubled between 1000 and 1300. With more mouths to feed, towns and cities began to grow. Trade revived, especially after the Crusades opened new routes to the east. Markets and fairs flourished, and a new merchant class began to challenge the old feudal order. As trade expanded, so did cities. Venice, Genoa, and Bruges became bustling centers of commerce, connecting Europe to the wider world. Urban life fostered new ideas and social mobility, setting the stage for further transformation. Europe's intellectual awakening began with the translation of ancient Greek and Arabic texts, often brought back from the Islamic world. Universities sprang up in Bologna, Paris, and Oxford. Scholasticism sought to reconcile faith with reason, and thinkers like Thomas Aquinas laid the groundwork for a new intellectual era. Feudalism began to wane as kings in England, France, and Spain consolidated power. Stronger states could levy taxes, raise armies, and enforce laws, creating the stability needed for economic and cultural growth. Europeans adopted and improved upon technologies from abroad, like the compass, paper, and gunpowder. Watermills and windmills boosted productivity, while advances in shipbuilding and navigation would soon open the world to European explorers. By the 15th century, Europe was ready to burst onto the global stage. The age of exploration was driven by a mix of curiosity, ambition, and necessity. So why did Europeans take to the seas? The overland Silk Road had become dangerous and expensive after the fall of the Mongol Empire and the rise of the Ottoman Turks, who controlled key trade routes. Europeans needed new ways to access the riches of Asia. Portugal led the way. Prince Henry the Navigator sponsored voyages down the African coast, seeking a sea route to India. Bartolomeu Dias rounded the Cape of Good Hope in 1488, and Vasco da Gama reached India in 1498. Spain soon followed. In 1492, Christopher Columbus set sail seeking a westward route to Asia, but landed in the Americas, in which Europeans called the New World, as they did not know it existed before. The Treaty of Tordesillas in 1494 divided the New World between Spain and Portugal, setting off a scramble for colonies. The impact was seismic. European powers established vast empires in the Americas, Africa, and Asia. The influx of silver and gold from the New World transformed European economies. The Columbian Exchange reshaped societies on both sides of the Atlantic. But this expansion came at a terrible cost. Indigenous populations in the Americas were decimated by disease and conquest, and the transatlantic slave trade uprooted millions of Africans. Yet for Europe, the age of exploration marked the beginning of global dominance. The 16th and 17th centuries saw Europe leap ahead in science and philosophy. The scientific revolution shattered old certainties. Copernicus placed the sun at the center of the universe. Galileo used the telescope to explore the heavens. Newton's laws of motion and gravity laid the foundation for modern physics. These breakthroughs were not just intellectual, they fueled technological innovation and economic growth. The Enlightenment followed, championing reason, individual rights, and skepticism of authority. Thinkers like Voltaire, Locke, and Rousseau challenged old hierarchies and inspired revolutions in America and France. Europe became the epicenter of new ideas that would shape the modern world. If the age of exploration gave Europe global reach, the Industrial Revolution gave it unprecedented power. Beginning in Britain around 1760, the Industrial Revolution transformed economies, societies, and the very fabric of daily life. Steam engines, mechanized looms, and railways revolutionized production and transportation. Factories sprang up, cities swelled, and Europe's share of global manufacturing soared. By 1840, British steam engines generated a significant portion of Europe's total energy, and other countries like France, Germany, and Belgium quickly followed. The ability to produce goods on a massive scale gave Europe a decisive edge in global trade and warfare. Urbanization accelerated. Millions left the countryside for factory jobs in cities. New social classes emerged, and with them, new tensions and opportunities. Europe's industrial might fueled further imperial expansion. By the late 19th century, European powers controlled vast swathes of Africa and Asia, extracting resources and imposing their rule on millions. By 1914, really only China, Japan, and the Ottoman Empire had escaped becoming European colonies. But Europe's dominance would not last forever. The 20th century brought two cataclysmic wars that would shatter the old order. The First World War, 1914 to 1918, devastated Europe. Millions died, economies were ruined, and empires collapsed. The Treaty of Versailles imposed harsh penalties on Germany, sowing the seeds for future conflict. The United States, by contrast, emerged stronger. Having lent vast sums to the Allies, America became the world's leading creditor. Its economy boomed while Europe struggled to recover. The Second World War, 1939-1945, was even more destructive. Cities lay in ruins, and the old colonial empires were fatally weakened. The process of decolonization began as European powers could no longer maintain their overseas holdings. America, meanwhile, became the undisputed superpower. By 1945, The United States was manufacturing more than half of the world's goods and held 2/3 of global gold reserves. The US led the creation of new international institutions: the United Nations, the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund, which cemented its leadership in the New World Order. The Marshall Plan poured billions into rebuilding Europe, but also tied Western Europe's fate to American economic and political power. This signaled the end of Europe's might as it became increasingly dependent on US support. So, why did Europe, once a medieval backwater, rise to global dominance? Europe's rise was not inevitable. For centuries, it lagged behind more advanced civilizations. But a unique combination of factors: agricultural innovation, urbanization, intellectual revival, political centralization, and technological borrowing set the stage for its ascent. The age of exploration and the Industrial Revolution multiplied Europe's power, allowing it to dominate much of the world. But this dominance was always fragile, built on competition, conflict, and exploitation. The devastation of the World Wars left Europe exhausted and dependent on American aid and leadership. And by 1945, the US rose to become the architect of the new global order and dominance. But for how long? If you enjoyed this journey through history, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and let us know in the comments what you might like the channel to cover next. And let's be historied together.